All right, just in about the nick of time. There's the sunset. Okay, it's kind of funny how these phones do that anymore. Anyway, Jeremy here, Jeeps Unlimited, 303-666-9020. You know, at the beginning of the year when I was doing a minor inventory, we were real slow. For some reason, I did not place how little or no narrow track frames I had for CJ7s. I had a stack of CJ7 frames. We've moved a lot of them. This is kind of what we have left over, wide tracks. But when I looked over, I just could have swore I had more narrows than I had wides. I didn't realize we had ran so low on them. So now I'm on the hunt to find more, and they've always been kind of difficult. They've gotten even harder. So anyway, without further ado, let's get into this guy. This is going to be a 76 to a 81, okay? Now, let me emphasize one thing. I've been doing this a long time. I can tell you just about everything you can possibly know on these things as far as the frames, the tubs, the differences, blah, 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 okay? Some of the 258 engines, I only say that because they made a 232, and it gets into the internals on those, and you really have to go off the casting code. Now, I'm not saying it for this customer at all. His is really easy. But I had a call earlier, and I thought I might address it later in the video, and I'll probably fire this off. So there's a stamp on the motors, and on that stamp, we have a catalog we use, and that catalog will tell you what crank you have in your 4.2. And why that's important, not really important, but there's a better, and there's a good, and there's a better, is that they had a 12 counterweight. It's oftentimes you hear as a stroker crank, because people like to pull them out and use them in the stroker builds on the later 4 liters. And then they had a 6 counterweight, okay? I think 6 or 4. Anyway, it's a lot lower. So, and all it is it's just a heavier crank that gives you a lot more low-end torque. And really, you don't see them past 80. You can see them in 80, but you don't see very many of them past 80. Now, the engine itself, if you were looking in on it from the top, you could not tell the difference. This is definitely something you'd have to read the casting numbers on the side of the block. And with that said, the guy that called me earlier, he was upset because he had bought an engine from some guy on eBay, and it was the right year, and the casting number, he had him read it off. It was all right. But when he got it, he went and pulled the crank, and sure enough, it was a smaller one. So somebody had swapped it out at one time, and who knows why they did that. Maybe just because that's all they could find, because they are harder to find, those 12 counterweights. We do actually have a couple of those for anybody that's ever going to be doing a rebuild on a motor. Whether it be a 4.2, just like kind of a standard build, or a little bit more performance, or if somebody's want to go back in and do a 4 liter, what they call sometimes a 4.7, 4.6, 4.9, depends on how big you make your displacement, how much you take out of the cylinders, and essentially it's a stroker that they put together. So, okay, that's my little bit on that. Now, with that said, on this frame, and this is kind of why I went off that tangent, is in 1976, right? So I'm saying 76 to 81 are all narrow track, which they are. And I already went over that very, very well. But essentially the way you can tell is the shock tower, okay? They just made the frame. They just set it up in the narrows or versus the lates. The lates, they just kind of set it up to where you'd have your shocks further out because the axle got wider, okay? There's some other changes, but that's it, okay? And we determined that's what this customer was looking for, and voila, we found a frame, which is awesome. So I didn't know we had one at first. I was kind of like, uh-oh. So, but I bring 76 into this equation because, and I just seen one on a 5 back there when I was messing around a few minutes ago, and it kind of reminded me. For the 1976, specifically the very early 1976, because it's a half year, your frames on a CJ5 and a CJ7 are going to look almost identical except for one big area. And if you're doing a frame off restoration, it's important to know this, because the 76 guys, and I've had this happen a few times, it's been a while, but usually we'll call and they'll go, well, that's not exactly what I'm looking for, even though it is. I shouldn't say it is. It's not. Truly, it's not for the 76 guys. And what the big difference on those ones, first time I ever saw it, it threw me, is it's a fully box frame. When I talk about box frame, we're talking about 2 sides, square, basically a square, rectangle, whatever you want to call it, tubing that comes back like they all are. Most of these are that way. And the real early CJs, they do it at C-channel. So it was open on the inside. But in 76, right at that little, you can kind of see it right there, right? And they have it on both sides. In 76, that's open from then there back. It wasn't until half of 76 and up that they started fully boxing their frames all the way to the rear. And it was a good thing they did that, because ultimately, especially on a 7 that are longer, 5s are the same way, but not quite as long, really was their weakest spot on them. And it still kind of is. It is the area that if you find rust on frames, either you have a lot of it and it's everywhere, or your back half of your frame is starting to go, okay? And I was reluctant on this one because there's a lot of clamps in the way. There was a fuel tank, you can see that down there, and a few other things to find to see if is this going to be rotted out. And I'm going to show you here close up here in a second before we lose light. And it's not, which is great. So the only thing on this frame out of everything, which is, as a matter of fact, I took a picture of a couple more I had back here, and it's almost always the case, which is part of the reason this is an inexpensive part. You don't have to replace this. This one's actually not terrible, but it would be something that if you wanted to, it is very inexpensive. We can drop ship them to you, and it's usually something we sell. Even with our solid grade A-frames, oftentimes you'll see this the same thing on them, whereas the back support area here, which is unfortunately how flimsy it is, it's a real thin piece. If you have a rear bumper, you're not going to be able to see this. This is actually really solid all through here, and it doesn't get, they get dinged up on the end, so not really that uncommon to get bent out of shape. This is one of your mounts, and it's pretty big there. It's actually still intact. Normally they're completely gone here and here. This one's still intact as well. This is like a toss-up. I mean, you can see it here too. This is starting to blow out here, and it's just this back C channel that they affix onto the back of the frame. And again, I'll show anybody that's interested, show you exactly what it looks like without it, because a lot of frames out here, even our good clean ones, are like that. It's such a thin piece. It does typically go, and if you see that, if you're looking at a frame and this happens to be the only thing on it that's kind of jacked up, it wouldn't be a deterrent for me. But what I would tell you is, and again, you'd have to have the frame completely stripped down in order to see this. Let me get on my knees so I can show you this. But there's often these little oops, that hurts, my knee hurts, L-shaped brackets. And I showed them in a video I did yesterday. You can kind of see the outline of them, okay? They go down and they tie in here. And they do that because this is such a flimsy piece, right? So if you put a bumper on it, you really need to make sure those are in there. But because it traps stuff in here, and it's two pieces of steel that basically clamp to these sides, I have seen in the past where this will start to eat itself away and blow itself out. This one is not. This is a broken stud up here. Always take note. I always like to point those out, and they're on both sides. And it's a good clean break. You still might drill these out. It's hard to say. It's usually with this material that kind of eats away at them. This one's perfect. They actually both usually break. CJs usually have a couple broken mounts on them. Not a big deal on it, but it is something I always like to show in my videos so you know exactly what you're up against when you get it. So obviously the minimal, the guys don't want to mess with them, and the guys are trying to save some money. Usually we find ones that might be as ugly, but I don't have many narrow tracks. This is the only one I got, and like I said, I was looking at it anyway. So this is all nice and solid. There's no material lost here. This is browning up, right? And you can see, look at the bare metal on this thing. It's browning over the paint, which is kind of unique. I think it's just a ton of dirt. I hit it with the hot seat. Unfortunately, my hot seat's having some issues right now, and I got halfway done. But you can see all the bare metal showing up on this thing, and I'll go through it real close. But I really wanted to show these areas here to show this is a nice solid area. It's not all blown out here. A little bit of layering up on this area here, a little bit of surface, but it's really more part of this bumper, this rear support area here, than it is anywhere else. And then same thing on this side. So nice and solid back there. Now, hopefully in the future we'll start sandblasting again, because this would be a perfect one to do that on. You don't have to do that on any of our frames. They're always pretty dang good shape, but it's remarkable how amazing sandblasting is, especially if you can get a good deal on it. So again, down in this area, nice and solid all the way through. And the frame, as I always say in all our frames, we always scope them, and the reason we do that is because, well, I mean, it's going to make sense. You probably know what I'm about to say, but you'd be surprised at how often a frame looks amazing from the outside, and a lot of times because people paint them and you can't see them, but and you get into them. So this one looks great on the inside. I don't see anything on it that's layered up that you're losing a ton of scale. Integrity of the steel is lost. And a lot of times on these guys, for whatever reason, besides this back piece, and this happens on any CJ because of the way, on the YJs, they didn't do this quite like this. This is 2 pieces of C-channel that they bent, obviously, and then they stick together and they weld them. This is all factory welds. And a lot of times you'll see them start cracking back here and really give completely away, or huge holes show up. This one's nice and solid on the outside and the inside, and you can even see just over there, there's a little bit of that bare metal. That bare metal is gonna show up pretty easily whether you wire wheel this thing or whether you sandblast it. You can see it all down through there. That's actually what my hot seat took off when it was working right today. And I think I could have got it almost all the way back. It would have taken me some time, which I normally don't do that in these, but I wanted just to show how clean indeed this frame was cleaning up to be. It was actually more impressive than we usually have. Even on some of these frames, these are my wide track frames that are, I always like to say my factory paint's still intact, which surprisingly they are on almost all those. Even with that said, to get paint off with just some heat and 4,000 psi is usually not very easy to do. You usually have to put something on them. So this frame had a ton of grease on it, and I think that's what preserved it so well. So like I said, they got a lot of oxidation on it, but we're not losing any kind of, not even surface rust. When I usually, and my definition of surface might be a little different than some, but what I always consider surface is, are you losing flakes? Is it bubbling up? Are you able to pull chunks of rust off, and can you see it? I mean, is that something that you can clearly see? So that's what this does not have. I mean, it's not as smooth as, like I said, some of those that still have all that paint still on them, but they're pretty dang smooth. I have no problem running my hand down through here. This is all nice and neat. And even the layering, even a little bit on these bottom, and I'll always show everything. I want you to see this thing if you're here in person. I always pull these, okay? This is where your bumpers go, your little bump stops for your axles. And if you overload your Jeep, they're gonna ride on these things. They're probably sitting up front, but these, all of the metal that you see, even over there, you can almost see it raised there. That's all from the actual metal plates that are on there, and they typically rust before the frames does because they're just a little bit thinner and probably worse shaped metal. So, but look at all your bolts here for your belly pans, okay? All the threads are clean all the way up, nothing broke. Again, not surprising on a CJ, just like the last 2 back there, to see broken studs on this. It wouldn't be something I would really knock much off of because it usually happens. But for whatever reason, just because it was clean enough, maybe, these are perfect. They're good threads, so you don't have to mess with that, okay? Your holes here look great all the way up. It was only those back 2 there. You have these 2 hidden ones that everybody always forgets at when they're messing with their tank, because that's what's hidden up in your tank area, okay? And then going up is your motor mounts. This one had a 4.2 in it, okay? So your motor mounts are actually the same. Typically I pull these, but I figured if the customer that was looking at this ends up with this frame, he's gonna need as much as I can possibly give him. And I did leave some of your brake and fuel lines on this. Now, they're clean. I don't know if they're bent though. That's the only thing I could tell you, is that they may not, they're the proportioning valves right there. That goes on the inner side of your frame. I left that on there for you. Not that that's a huge deal. They are expensive, but I just figured there's some things on here I would go ahead and keep. The little brake brackets, those are in good shape. Obviously, we cut the lines on them, but those were cut long ago. Otherwise, I wouldn't have let them cut them. Usually, I don't let them cut stuff like that. But the actual hard line that goes over, that sees out, is still there intact. So, and then again, this is your 4.2 motor mounts. This is exactly what you have. There's a bracing piece there. A lot of people don't have that. That's because somebody's pulled it off, possibly in an oil change, because they get kind of in the way, and then just said, screw it, I'm not putting this thing back on. It doesn't look like it does anything anyway. And maybe not. But we always like to see that on them because it just shows that it was kind of, unmolested. So again, here's your motor mount, or your shock mounts here, and all the way up to the front. This had a big mount on it, and it was at first, again, it was one of those things I didn't know if we were going to be able to pull it. It was they had a snowplow mount on the thing, and a lot of times when you see those, they get monkeyed up the frames to bolt those. They didn't do that on this. They used a factory one that was made by Jeep, and so that was there, and it pulled right off, surprisingly. So look how clean this one is. This one almost always goes. It's just kind of like the back two, and it's perfectly round. And those are bushings, by the way, for those of you who don't know, haven't really looked up under your Jeep. there's a bushing that clamps from the top to the bottom, a metal sleeve rolls through it, and then your bolt actually goes up into it, and it's actually what locks, in that case, your front radiator support down. Okay, the rest of these are for body to frame mount. So, all right, now I'm gonna flip it over. We're looking at the bottom right now. You probably figured that out. We'll flip her over and try to get this done before I lose all my light tonight, because it's fading fast out here. And usually these aren't all that heavy. We just wash it, so it's got some water coming out still. All right. Okay, so shock mounts, those are factory. Those are going to be the same that you have for a wide track or a narrow. They didn't change that part of this on the two, and I talked a little bit about that, but that's something you cannot identify. You have to look at the front, okay? Both cross members back here are in good shape. There's no cracking. They're solid. There's no rust on them, okay? And again, if you look at that piece here, you can actually see the factory paint now on the top of it. I would probably not, if it was me, replace that unless you just happen to be wanting to practice with a welder. They are tacked on to both places, but I do think the original one is a little stronger, you know, than the stamped steel they put out of probably China or whoever they're getting them from. And you can fix this up. Matter of fact, most people who do frame swaps realize that these do go, and usually will beef this area up no matter what. And you can simply put, I'll show you something on it's for a different project we're working on, but something just like this on the top and really thicken this up. It is extremely thin metal for that section there. So, but I will show you the mount that you can if you do decide you want to replace it, okay? And then again, coming down the rails here, good mounts. This is for your brake lines, your e-brake. This is like an e-brake cable. A lot of those are missing. This one's intact, that's great. Okay, and then again, you got your proportion valve. We're looking at it opposite now. Here's your motor mounts. These are for the 4.2. And then these are your shock mounts. Now, these are what I said changes on them. So if it's a wide track, you're gonna have, that's not gonna be welded on. They're gonna be bolted on. And if you ever convert to a wide track, then that's what you'll do. You'll take those off, you'll drill the holes because the other ones are actually bolted on. And I don't think I have any close by, otherwise I'll show you. And then that takes care of that. The front cross member is in excellent shape. Coming down the sides of it. Again, all the shiny stuff is the bare metal. All the black is factory paint. Not a lot of it left, but there is some. And then coming all the way back, you can see it start, there's a little bit show up there all the way back. So really is, we lucked out. I really am, regardless if it sells it on this trip or not, this one, I know we'll end up moving it. Especially now that we, only one we got. So, and then again, that's your bare metal. So, and again, I don't paint our frames. We could throw some paint on it, but really to do this one right, I would get it completely down to bare metal. Especially if you're in the East Coast and going to be using it in the winter. If you're not going to be doing anything in the winter, you could definitely put a Rust-Oleum. There's several products out there that will neutralize any kind of surface, you know, self-etch, and you can paint right over the stuff that you see here. Just a little bit. I would clean it with soap and water, of course, get any grime that's left on. I did a pretty good job, but when that hot seat went down, I kind of got left with it. And it's so dark out here, hopefully you can see any of this. But anyway, it's just more informational at this point. So I'm gonna fire this or upload it. It'll take me a little bit to do that. Fire it off. I still have a little bit more to do. So we don't have to have a decision tonight. I'm going to, I have one more tub to wash. You know, like I say in a lot of my videos, when I do these trips, they're long trips. I'm away from my family. I want to make sure I get as much on here as I possibly can. And I got one more tub, at least of right now, to do in the morning. And I'll probably just wait on doing the photos on the top of this one, if it does end up getting listed and not sold, tomorrow as well when I have a little better light. And if you have any questions, comments, and even if, you know, I always make my videos, a lot of times you'll hear me say this is for somebody who called. Doesn't always mean they sell. So definitely give me a holler. And even if it does sell, you know, we constantly try to buy these things or working on buying them. CJs are getting hard to get. Unfortunately, the 7s are the hardest to get right now. And they have been for a long time. We almost don't even part them out anymore, especially when it comes to a good solid tub, because you can't get enough. You used to be able to get more out of parts than you could out of selling them. Now they're bringing such good money, it is very difficult to part a CJ out that's clean without rust. Now we got two of them up there right now. There's a 84, I believe it is, and then a 85, I want to say. Both out of California, both beautiful. One's a rolling chassis, but it's been almost completely done. It needs an engine. We got that inside the garage. And then we have another one that's just like a bone stock, but both are beautiful, rust-free. And that's really what came down to it. Was they were wide tracks, of course, later, but we just could not add the numbers up to where we know we can sell them whole. And it's unfortunate. We're a parts yard. That's what we've always been. So we either don't do them, or just, when we land one, we'll grab them. And they may not be, like a lot of these CJs out here are coming in not in the best of shape, unfortunately, anymore. But that's about the only ones that I would part. So this is kind of our leftover. Okay, and then for anybody who's looking for wide track, I just put an absolutely gorgeous one up the other night. I also have these 3. These are going to be beautiful ones as well. I don't think there's anything that'll come back, but they do need to be washed. I think that's it. So again, Jeremy here, Jeeps Unlimited, partsbreakers.com. It's just partsbreakers.com. I always say Jeeps Unlimited because that's our legacy name. We're just not supposed to use it on the interweb anymore. Jeep didn't want that. So now we just use the Parts Breakers on our national level. And our phone number, of course, is the 303-666-9020. It's the same number we've had since 1984. And I look forward to meeting you guys if I get a chance on this trip. Otherwise, if you miss this trip, not a big deal. This is our busy season, so we do roll hot shots out about every 2 weeks. They're a little bit more, so you do save a little bit when I come out, but not a lot. It's just more of a convenience, and I'd be a little more flexible. My hot shots are pretty much like, here, this is when we're going to be there. If somebody's there, great. If not, it's going in your front yard, which is no big deal. I mean, other than you got to pay the guys because they're usually COD. And with me, it's a little different. I have a few people on this trip that are going to be only one right now that has got like a set schedule and won't be available other than this weekend. So I'm going to have to hurry and hightail it out of here. But yeah, that was a mouthful. All right. Thank you.